Yo, 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 we're back with the fourth entry into our minds. This is what we're reading. And basically we're more than halfway through now. We're like this far through, a little over halfway. And I feel like there's more real world events kind of going on in this one. He just left the Salami Islands, right? Not bologna, salami, where we had some interesting characters, like all these bearded fellows that look sort of like a mix of some like Nordic gnomes, I guess, is what they look like to me. Is they look like gnomes, kind of. But they're just people, but they all like had beards and were all bald, and they all called each other by numbers and stuff like that. And things were kind of getting restless for Aristotle, where he was teaching previously. So we went to the island of Salami to go and work with the council of these dudes or whatever. He like made some jokes about how they were weirdos or something, but then he got there, and I think that he enjoyed quite a bit of just how participatory they were with his ideas, is what it seemed like to me. And where we kind of left off with his teachings there, before we continue on with his story itself, he was speaking about celestial bodies, and he introduced this idea which was like super familiar to me. And it's so strange when you kind of have an idea, right? You're just like out having an idea somewhere, and then lo and behold, it's like I just read this idea in this book, and it was kind of interesting. It was actually super interesting. Because I was like, whoa, that is so weird. I've heard this before, but it was from me as I was just walking in these woods. Like, I was literally contemplating the idea of what is the truest way to sort of surmise something. And I figured that it was like mass. And I figured, though, that once we approach the truth itself is something which is immovable. You know, like in the beginning, it's something that's immovable, but I referenced it as like light. And it was as though the idea that everything was solid was what actually made everything move. And so it was like the closer that we approached the truth, the closer that we reached that idea of infinite mass, almost like the relationship in Einstein's equation. And then, you know, that equates to basically energy and, you know, the fastest that things can move, which then allows us to experience time. And I basically, you know what I mean, like wrote this all out, like this huge thing about what is the closest we can get to the truth. And I basically felt like that was the closest that we could actually ascertain the truth, was with that idea. But that's what actually moves everything, is what I sort of concluded. And if you give emotion to things, then it's sort of is, you know, things are repelled from that fear almost of being everything, because it's in similitude of being nothing, you know. And so there's plenty of things that go along with the idea of the truth. So many sayings that have been overstated, you know, and everything. But I felt like I was like, oh, I'm really saying something that was like pretty genuine and original. And I wrote it all out, and I thought, I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? I'm gonna send this to some people. So I did. I like made it into a little document and sent it away. I'm sure I made a video on it and stuff like that, but I just remember, and I was like, geez. So right here, you get into it. I'll show it to you. Right here on this page is where we get into it. I'm just like, that is so strange. He almost worded it the exact same way as me too. It's a little different, but I was just like, that's so interesting. Because they're describing like natural movement and inherent movement of things. Most motions are violent. In other words, a being in motion acts upon another being to impart upon it its motion. Therefore, all beings in motion are moved by something else. The other thing is in turn moved by something else, and so on infinitely. Everything is set into motion by a first being, which is not moving. That's what Aristotle calls the unmoved mover, the prime mover, but we'll hear about this more later. I was just like, oh, that's so interesting. So then he displays some ideas of time, and he has a rope, splits it in half, and he's like, the moment where it splits is the present kind of thing. They talk about the celestial objects, and then we get into something else. Like, he goes, anyways, he leaves this island, and he meets back up with some people that were like, we had no way of telling you the news, but like somebody that you knew has like died and all this stuff. And I think it was like Plato had passed too. So like all these people around him that he had known for a long time before he left on his like little journey to go teach these like sort of isolated people on this island or whatever. He like didn't have any way of communicating with these people, and so they passed away. And then he got back, got all the news, and he's like, I need to go, because there was like one kid who was like an orphan. He's like, I need to go and make sure that he's all right. So he like goes to make sure that this kid's being taken care of. And then one of his buddies has a niece there, and she's all like super in knowledge and stuff like that. She's like, yeah, how can you not be when you're this dude's niece? And it's like one of Aristotle's peers. Well, anyways, they like go to the temple of Athena or something like that, and she like does this, she like says this poem and stuff, and he's like, what does that mean? And then he like asks some drunk priest, and he's like, I'll tell you what it means. And then he's like, oh, I get the idea. Okay, you don't have to tell me anymore, you know, I get the idea. And so he like goes, and then he kind of says like something to her about, well, do you still have your children's toys? And she was like, yeah, why? And he's like, so we can make an offering to Artemis. And she's like, and he was like, she was all surprised, and he's like, so I guess that's also a custom here too for marriage or proposal or something. So they get like married and hitched and all this stuff, and then he's just living his best life basically at this point. You know, like, and we're like seeing some real events or whatever that he's having in turn with this. So yeah, kind of interesting. It's like a big change of pace, you know what I mean? It's like getting wet almost. It's like we're so dry, like talking about all this stuff, and it's like somebody urging us to play almost, right? And it's like, I'm sure a lot of you can almost envision, you know, being around somebody who's in water, and you're just like, I don't really want to swim or get wet, basically, you know what I mean? Like, I'm comfortable, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just comfortable, like, has nothing to do with anything else. I'm just comfortable. And they're like, come on, get in, you know what I mean? So they plunge you in, and it's like a dramatic change like that of just like, okay, all of a sudden I'm wet, and it's just like I don't have these other concerns or cares that I did before, right? And so it's almost like we're observing things all of a sudden moving very fast. It's like we were studying things that were so big as to the nature of all things or whatever. And then all of a sudden we're observing something so small and minute, which is just maybe like humility itself, which is probably one of the closest things to, maybe like a very gentle spirit, which, I think is something that is surrounding ideas of marriage and stuff like that. It's all of a sudden we're acknowledging like this humility of things and of our own current situation rather than other things and things like that. Maybe there's a little bit of jealousy and greed in there as well, because then we feel as though we need to be characters in our own lives and we're not just living for the preposition of all this other kind of stuff. But then we kind of fast forward through him just like studying all this stuff, and they moved to the island of Lesbos or whatever, because there's more war and Persian kind of influence, and King Philip and all this kind of stuff is going on, and so they run away to the island of Lesbos and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we are, and he's like just studying things, and he's like dissecting things and making observations, and his wife is like all into herbs and whatever else kind of thing, maybe even crystals. I don't know, but just messing around. Also I kind of wrote in my journal too, but I thought there was one thing at least worth like showing, and that's just I drew a random picture. I got to cover up one part of it or whatever, but I like wrote a little bit about like my day and like the seasons and how I was feeling and stuff like that. And then basically I just imagined like the process for me is like, what's the most difficult thing I can do? I genuinely imagine that, because for me the day is all about challenging myself and making things feel true. If I can come across sort of something where I feel as though it's a ledge that's above me kind of thing, and I can grab a hold of that, then I feel as though I've created a position where I'm not falling backwards. And it's true and it's natural, and there's nothing almost more immovable, as we're saying in these, just like in what I'm talking about with these guys, it's just like, yeah, there's this mental aspect of the world and there's this physical aspect of the world, and they both kind of keep each other in check, kind of thing. So, you know what I mean? We can think about things and we can deal with things, and then we can have real things that allow us to basically be protected perhaps from things that aren't. You know what I mean? Like, maybe so. Well, anyways, I was just like, what's the hardest thing I can draw? And honestly, drawing women is like I feel like drawing like attractive women is just like a very difficult thing, because it's just like, if you just do it, you just got to do it. And it's like, you never know like how big of or deep of a rabbit hole you're going to go down trying to like chase something or whatever. And so I just like, I'm going to challenge myself a little bit. I'm going to draw a woman, and I'm going to do my best to make her attractive, because honestly, like, for me, every motion is pretty important nowadays. I'm pretty clocked in, you know what I mean? Like, I'm on my own clock kind of thing, and it's like, I'm very conscious about every decision that I'm making and how it makes me feel, I am susceptible to sort of my own consequences, even if they're more immediate or long or short, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So just, it kind of wanes on your own confidence if you attempt something and you can't necessarily complete it or do it in a fashion that you approve of. But I like to create the sense that I've grabbed that ledge, so to speak, and I like to use as much natural features and objects as I can to, create a sensation that I've actually done something real, sort of in a sense, sort of just like drawing this. At the beginning of this book, I opened it up and I wanted to actually make a mark, on the book. And that creature has baffled so many people. They're just like, how'd you even draw that? I was like, dude, I just made it up. But I understand aesthetics, though. It's like you can understand, like, the idea of something that's pleasing and what direction you can move something, even something that's unknown. See, here you go, reality. Like, here's a little bit of a check for you. Like, watch out. You might want things to actually be kind of real. Because this stuff like this is what exists inside Plato's world, his ethereal realm or whatever. And it basically operates off of a lot of the same things that real things do, because obviously if you want something to entertain the right spirit, you have to basically take as many risks and chances as with something you do that's real. So I was just like, I'm gonna attempt something, I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna draw a woman because I know that it's hard and I'm gonna do it. So I gotta block one part of it, but there you go. Just, you know what I mean? Like, I started just with the legs and I was just like, all right. And then I basically made the entire thing up. You know what I mean? This is not looking off anything. This is completely based off of my own judgment of measure and rhythm and flow, direction and size and orientation, light and dark and everything. But yeah, kind of like oddly fitting for what I'm reading, you know what I mean? It's a Medusa figure or whatever, like maybe different than any other Medusa you've ever seen, probably, definitely, you know what I mean, an original Medusa kind of thing. But I just sort of, like reached for it, which is how you climb. If any of you have ever done any rock climbing, like sometimes you just reach like a limit there at the end and there's a ledge or something like that that's just right there at the lip or at the top or the next move or something, and you just know you got to move. And it's like a real quick jump kind of thing. It's like any kind of almost dangerous, risky sports activity too, that sensation of going and just proving yourself kind of thing. That's a very short, and even though it's in like a more controlled way of taking a risk, like I said, depending on how efficient you are or how much of a perfectionist you are within your own life, like even doing that can definitely do some damage during your day and with your own psychology and whatever else. So feel like that was kind of serendipitous, you know what I mean? Like just kind of drawing that figure and basically taking it line by line until it just sort of like shaped out. I'm just like, yeah, that's a cool drawing, you know what I mean? So there you go. You got some real Greek history and then some real Greek history too. And then I'm a real geek. So anyways, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, so there's kind of what I did out here today. Later.